What's up everyone, I'm CallumOnToast, and in today's video I'm going to be showcasing some battles in the Fossil Cup with a pretty random but effective team consisting of XL Lombre, Golisopod and Heatran. Now these battles were done a few days ago, and as is the case with many very limited metas, there may have been a slight shift in the meta since I did these battles, but at the time, despite the many water types, Heatran was pretty good as a hard answer to Ferrothorn and a lot of the other steel types. Now I typically run ABB style teams, so this team felt a little bit weird to me. You definitely need to be a lot better at reading teams and predicting the third and final Pokemon with a team like this, because Heatran and Golisopod, whilst they do share some positive matchups, they also have some very differing matchups, whereas if you've got two Pokemon that do pretty much the exact same thing in the back, the Pokemon you decide to bring in as a counter to a safe swap is much less important because both Pokemon have very similar coverage. Overall, I went pretty positive with this team, but Mantine is a huge core breaker, so if you're seeing it frequently, you're probably going to struggle, although realistically, there aren't that many of you that are going to have an XL Lombre and a Great League Heatran already built, so it doesn't really matter. Before we get into the question of the day, I want to give a quick shout out to both Daryl Winborn and Colin L for the gifted memberships in yesterday's stream with Jamie Finn, and if you have noticed you're now suddenly a channel member, you can probably thank one of those two. Anyways, with that being said, let's get into the question of the day. If you could completely redo the Fossil Cup meta so that fossil Pokemon were actually viable in the meta, which typings would you allow and what restrictions would you make to ensure that fossil Pokemon actually had some play? Let me know in the comment section down below, and with that being said, let's get into the battles now. Alright, so heading into the first battle, the Lombre into Poliwrath, so this is a positive matchup for us. The opponent's going to say swap into a Magnezone. Now, we're a little bit slow to swap out there, and the opponent can fire off the charge move. The opponent is going to full send the wild charge, so we respect the damage there. They're going to make it to another move, but this will just be a Mirror Shot, which is resisted damage, so we tank that very comfortably. Unfortunately, they do drop our attack, and of course, Heatran not very good into Poliwrath anyways, but with a debuff to our attack, they can comfortably tank an Earth Power. They're going to let it go through there, go for the full counter farm down, but that's absolutely okay. We've got Golisopod, and we're going to completely wall everything they can possibly throw here, so I'm definitely going to no shield. The opponent goes for an icy win, dropping our attack, and unfortunately this is not good. And you're going to notice in these first few battles, I'm still running X's. I figured there's a lot of water type Pokemon in this meta, having liquidation might not be particularly helpful, but it just turns out that X's and just bug typing in general is an absolutely awful offensive typing. Pretty much everything resists it, so that is not ideal. So eventually I do swap it out for liquidation, but luckily for me, the opponent has no clue what moves Lombre can run, and that's one of the benefits of running something just completely random like an XL Lombre. The opponent shields a debuffed Bubble Beam there, and that's huge for me because that would have done very little damage, and now we've still only got resisted charge moves to throw, but Golisopod can just safely shield this up. I'm going to overfarm in case they swap back into Poliwrath, making sure I've always got a charge move to throw. We overfarm just a little bit once again, going for the Aerial Ace, getting the KO here, and despite being resisted and being debuffed, Xyzer will put them into range, where one more Shadow Claw will allow us to get the farm down up against the Registeel, and I'm able to take that game. So GG's to opponent there. Into next game, we see Lombre into Pelipper. Now, Pelipper, bit awkward for us, but nowhere near as awkward as a Mantine because they're going to have to full send a Hurricane to get the KO here. So they did farm up to it. I'm going to respect the damage, and the opponent does full send it. They now swap into Ferrothorn, and this is just an insane matchup for Heatran. We can just safely no shield this. They're going to have to go for a Thunder. Thunder does some decent damage actually, but again, this Pelipper won't be able to farm us down because they're running Wing Attack. So we can go for one extra Fire Spin, go for the Magma Storm. I'm actually not entirely sure how much energy they've got. I can't really remember. I think they swapped out straight away, so I probably could have gone for one extra Fire Spin, but I play it safe. I fire off the next Magma Storm straight away, and the opponent, very good timing thrown just before we make it to a third Magma Storm. They go for the Weather Ball, fine with me. We're going to come back in with the Lombre, I do believe. They swap into Lucario. I'm just going to fire off the Bubble Beam here because, of course, it's not going to do much damage, but it will drop their attack, meaning Golisopod can now very comfortably live a Thunder Punch, and all I've got to do here is farm up two back-to-back charge moves, and the opponent is just going to concede the match there. So GG's to opponent there. Into the next battle, we can see Lombre into Mantine. Now this is the core breaker that I am very much going to struggle against. Honestly, I don't have a clue what to do. I'm going to stay in with my Lombre. I'm going to shield the first move here because I will be able to make it to a Bubble Beam before they make it to Aerial Ace number 2, but this isn't actually going to help me all that much. All it will do is, well, it grabs a shield, that's okay, but they're now going to be able to just fully farm me down after landing an Aerial Ace, which might be worse, so I actually swap into my Heatran here. This is one of the first battles I did. I wasn't sure sure if Mantine's were going to be running either Water Pulse or Ice Beam. I figured since I have debuffed them, I guess I kind of have to just no shield that move there. But it is the Water Pulse. It does big damage. They're not going to be able to farm me down here, but I think at this point, I probably have to just let the Heatran go down. It is worth noting they're staying in with the Mantine and they shielded, so they might be weak to fire in the back, but at this point, I kind of just have to let it go down here. Going to come in with Galissapod. I'm going to fire off the Exeter here. I realize it's also going to KO, and just in case they try to catch a resisted Aerial Ace onto something, I go for the Exeter there. It doesn't really make a difference at all, and they're going to come in with Escavalier now. I also didn't realize, being pretty early in the meta, most Escavaliers are going to be running Aerial Ace, so they're actually pacing to the first charge move slightly faster than I was expecting, and as well, Aerial Ace is going to hit for super effective damage up against us. I'm going to try and swap, make a catch onto my Lombre, but it kind of just depends what they've got in the back. They go for the Aerial Ace, they get the KO, and they've got a Ferrothorn. So you can see, of course, their backline incredibly weak to fire, but if I shielded my Heatran from that range, they could have just counter-farmed me down anyway, so it wouldn't have made a difference. At this point, this is probably one of the only matches where Exeter is slightly better for us, but unfortunately, a second Exeter wouldn't get the KO there, so I didn't bother throwing, and unfortunately, we do lose that game. Into next battle, great lead and also great save swap for us as they come in with Alolan Sandslash. I'm definitely going to shield. Druron hits for double super effective damage, but we can just shield that up, go for the Fire Spin, farm down. They're going to come back in with their Shadow Swampert, and we're going to go straight for the Earth Power. Earth Power is going to deal big damage in this matchup, and if they don't throw straight away here, I'm going to make it to a Magma Storm. From this range, it probably would KO, so we grab a shield from the opponent. They get a huge mudshot farm down, but unless they're running Sludge Wave, which I just can't see happening, we can take this move very comfortably on our Lombre, and they've got a Macargo in the back. And again, another matchup where not having Liquidation is going to cost us, because I just can't hit this thing for anything other than resisted charge move damage, so that's not ideal. Initially, I was going to go for an Exeter, and then I realized actually Exeter is going to be, well, actually, never mind. Rock does not resist Exeter at all, but I figured here, actually, the best play for me is just to not throw my charge move at all, force the opponent to throw immediately, and that way we can just barely outpace them with the Lombre to a Bubble Beam, and of course, Bubble Beam going to hit for double super effective damage. It takes out Macargo from that range, and I'm able to take that game. So GG to opponent there. Into next game, we see a Lombre into Registeel. So of course, gonna save swap into my Galissapod, but again, Liquidation would be very useful here, and unfortunately, I'm not running it. So eventually, I do swap it out, but I have very little charge TM, so it's always very risky playing the charge move roulette game with the TM system. I could end up with like Razor Shell or something, so that would not be ideal. I'm gonna shield the first move here. I'm probably not gonna grab a shield back from the Registeel, which is very unfortunate, but at this point, I have to just let it go down. I can't double shield here because even then they could probably still win the 0-2 shield scenario up against Galissapod when I'm not running Liquidation. We're now going to come in with our Heatran, and hopefully we can go for a full Fire Spin farm down, and we get the farm down, which is huge. They're going to come in with a Shadow Poliwrath, so I'm going straight for the Earth Power. They actually let that go through. We get the defense drop, and that one Razor Leaf did huge damage in that matchup. And at this point, this is now going to be game over. I can just safely shield up my Lombre. You're going to go for a Bubble Beam here because, of course, they bait me with a Surf, but it doesn't really matter because now, if they do land the Shadow Ball, it's not going to do nearly as much damage. We can go for the full Razor Leaf farm down, and that Poliwrath is at like maybe 2 or 3 Razor Leaf range, so we can just farm them down here, go for 3 more Razor Leaves, get the farm down up against the Poliwrath, and I'm able to take that game. Now we're going to lead into our dad here, Lombre into Ludicolo, get a save swap into Galissapod, and yet another game where having Exeter is absolutely useless for us, as they're going to double resist it with a Steel and Fairy type Pokemon. We go for the Aerial Ace, we actually grab a shield there, and because we're going for Aerial Ace, I feel like maybe they might shield the next move as well, thinking we're probably running Aerial Ace and Liquidation. So Aerial Ace, number 2, grabs the final shield from the opponent, and if I was running Liquidation here, I would have been able to grab a 0-2 shield advantage and switch advantage, but unfortunately I'm not, so we do end up losing that matchup there. I can come in with either Pokemon. I probably actually should have come in with my Lombre there because I think I could have just Razor Leaf farmed them down anyways, but now I have to take a super effective boosted power up punch. We're going to come in with our Lombre, and the opponent comes back in with their Ludicolo. Now unfortunately they are going to be dealing more damage with the Razor Leaves here, so we're going to go for the Grass Knot. Grass Knot gets the KO, but they can come back in with the Poliwrath. They're probably just going to go for an Icy Wind here. I have to shield this, but they're going to drop my attack, so now unfortunately if I do make it to the Earth Power, it will no longer be enough damage to get the KO, so we're going to go for the Earth Power anyways, just to see how much damage it does, but it just barely doesn't get the knockout. They get the counter farm down, and unfortunately we do lose that game. But GG's to opponent there. Internet's going to see Poliwrath in the lead. They're going to swap into their own Lombre. They're actually best buddy boosted as well. But we can come in with the Heatran. And since I'm running my own Lombre here, I know it's just going to be a Bubble Beam. I'm not going to do too much damage there. Unfortunately, it does mean we're not going to be able to go for a full Fire Spin farm down. But that's okay. I'm going to go for a slight undercharge there. Get off one extra Fire Spin before we get the farm down. They come back in with the Poliwrath. And once again, we are debuffed, so it's not going to do that much damage. But it does connect, and the opponent gets a full counter farm down. Now, of course, we've got Golisopod once again to completely wall the moveset here, but they're going to swap into their Ludicolo. So we're going to go straight for an Aerial Ace here. Again, not really wanting to give away that I'm running Exeter, but then in the end, I figured it doesn't really matter, so we'll just fire off the Exeter anyways. Exeter will be doing a lot more damage than the Aerial Ace, but we grab both shields, and at this point, we put them into range where, unless they go for Scald and get a debuff, which they go for the Scald, but they don't get the debuff there, we can now just commit to a full Razor Leaf farm down. I'm going to come out with a Grass Knot loaded, so I'm going to fire that off straight away into the Poliwrath coming back in, and Grass Knot gets the KO, and I'm able to take that game. So GG's to opponent there. Internet's going to see Lombre into Lantern, so this is definitely where we want to sit with this team. The opponent is going to stay in initially, then swap into Poliwrath. I could have maybe stayed in for a little bit longer there just to guarantee alignment, because if they start shielding and going for Icy Winds here, this might be a little bit of an awkward matchup for us. I don't really intend on shielding in this matchup, so that's fine. I realize that Heatran, with a significant shield advantage, will also be able to beat the Lantern in the back, so I'm actually not that fussed. But either way, going to go for the Aerial Ace. We do connect this time around, so at this point I'm thinking maybe I can let this go through here. It's going to be very close though. Can we get the farm down? No, we're not able to do so, but I make it to a charge move at the last second, and Exeter will get the KO, so we maintain alignment and we've got a shield advantage, and this is just going to be game over for the opponent. They're going to swap back into Lantern. We come in with the Lombre. The safe play is just to double shield here and go for a full Razor Leaf farm down. Well, if they do farm up to back-to-back Thunderbolts here, but I believe this is just going to be a Surf. It's going to be double resisted, so there's no need for me to shield, and even from this range, it wouldn't really matter if we did go down there, because Heatran could get the Fire Spin farm down. But anyways, they're going to come back in with the Ferrothorn. Honestly, I've got no clue why they're playing this game out here. We're going to reach back-to-back Bubble Beams. There's literally nothing they can do up against my Heatran, but they're going to farm to well over 100 energy just for the sake of it. And by the time we come back in with our Heatran, they should just be giving up at this point, because first of all, they're only making it to one charge move, but secondly, this Thunderbolt is going to do very little damage. Sorry, Thunder going to do very little damage up against the Heatran, and I'm able to take that game. So GG's opponent there. Internet's going to see Golisopod in the lead, so we're just going to stay in initially, and depending on what they throw here, the opponent's going to go for an Exeter, so I think eventually I'm going to swap. Never mind, the opponent swaps into Kartana, 3 Fire Spins, and it goes down, completely shredded there. They're going to come in with a Poliwrath, and actually a little bit awkward for us, especially when we're trying to throw the Earth Power when they get 3 counters in for free. That is very frustrating, but realistically the Fire Spin damage isn't doing much anyway, so it's not the end of the world. Again, just going to come in with Golisopod, completely wall the moveset from this Poliwrath, not going to shield a charge move. The opponent goes for the Icy Wind, going for the debuff there, absolutely fine with me. They are going to, well, we're going to go for the Aerial Ace here. Aerial Ace is going to connect, it doesn't do much damage. Again, we can just no shield, and then I think I'm just going to swap straight away into my Lombre, and actually go for a power up punch there. Doesn't really matter. I'm going to go for a Bubble Beam straight away. I realize even if they call this, it does not matter, because now we can just go for a full Razor Leaf farm down, shield this up, and I will be able to Razor Leaf farm down the Poliwrath as well, and I will be able to take out the Poliwrath there, so the opponent just concedes the match. Now, typically, I don't like to run Razor Leaf because it is kind of toxic, but, I mean, when you're running an XL Lombre, it's a bit of a weird one, so I don't have too much of a problem running, like, very odd Razor Leaf users, but anyways, into the next battle, the opponent safe swaps into Lucario. I was very slow to swap there. I'm actually going for a Liquidation here, just to fish for the defense drop here, because if I do get the defense drop, then I just guarantee a full Shadow Claw farm down. But even without the drop there, you can see I will be able to go for a full Shadow Claw farm down, and we come out with a ton of loaded energy. Now, the opponent's going to come in with their Jellicent once again, and again, I'm fishing for the Liquidation debuff. Quite unnecessary really, but because I haven't thrown an aerial ace here, maybe they're not expecting it. So we're going to go for the aerial ace, and if they don't throw straight away here, I'm going to make it to another aerial ace, which is very nice. This should be grabbing a shield from the Jellicent, and it does grab that shield. They can go for a full Hex farm down, but absolutely okay with me. We're going to come in with the Lombre. They're going to fire off a charge move. Now I expect them to swap straight away, but I'm not going to swap immediately here, and we can come in with the Heatran. This is going to be game over, so the opponent just concedes the match there. So again, Heatran completely walling the Ferrothorn, and it was just GG's as soon as that matchup came about. But into the next battle, awful lead. We tried to swap straight away, we're not able to do so, and unfortunately met with a Pelipper. Now this is not ideal for us, especially since by the time the opponent has to throw here, we will just be in weatherable range, so that's not ideal. At least with the Lombre, they can't really afford to go for weatherballs because they're double resisted. But yeah, by the time they throw a charge move here, weatherball pretty much going to get the KO, and if it doesn't get the KO, that's actually slightly worse for us because we still don't make it to a charge move. But either way, we are going to wait out the switch clock here, come in with our Lombre, and we've just got to hope that Heatran can sweep in the back here. But we are going to shield this move as they full send the Hurricane. Fine with me, we get the Razor Leaf farm down. I'm actually going to stay in this matchup if they come back in with the Escavalier, and I should maybe be able to live an aerial ace here, so I'm going to let this move go through. We actually go for an Acid Spray there, but they've got a Lantern in the back. Now, of course, I've got Earth Power for coverage, but I'm just a little bit too slow to make it to the charge move. So we're going to shield up the Surf here. I'm going to overfarm by 3 Fire Spins, go for the Earth Power. I need this to connect here. Earth Power is going to connect. It does big damage, but they're able to make it to another Surf one turn before we make it to a Magma Storm. And even if we did land that Magma Storm there, I think it's GG's anyways. We're going to go for a Bubble Beam. It doesn't really make a difference here. They're still going to be able to make it to another charge move up against my Lombre, and unfortunately it doesn't matter what we do here. Anything they throw is basically going to get the KO. Even a resisted drill run takes us out, and unfortunately we lose that game. But GG's to opponent there, not an awful lot I could have done. We were basically just triple hard countered. But into the next battle, we're going to see a Lombre up against Pelipper, and they're actually not even farming to the Hurricane, so definitely just going to no-shield that. Double resisted Weather Ball doesn't do much damage whatsoever. Going to no-shield once again, and I think I possibly could have just gone for a Bubble Beam there, but I'm going to play it safe. Just go for the Grass Knot. Grass Knot guarantees the KO. They're going to come in with Registeel, and honestly, this is a bit awkward for me. Maybe I should have swapped into a different Pokemon here, but instead I'm going to allow them to fully farm me down. I do drop their attack with the Bubble Beam though. We're going to come in with the Heatran here, and we get a full Fire Spin in for free as the opponent throws on awkward timing, and the opponent's going to swap into an Escavalier, so it doesn't really matter. I'm going to swap, catch an Aerial Ace, which is actually super effective. Honestly, I didn't need to make that catch there. Heatran would have lived an Aerial Ace very comfortably, but just in case the opponent got damage registration error and made it to a drill run, I didn't really want to risk that. So instead, we swap into Golisopod. The opponent going to have to throw a charge move to take us out here, and Heatran should be able to make it to back-to-back Magma Storms very comfortably into this Registeel. So we're going to farm up, go for 2 Fire Spins, go for the Magma Storm, and at this point, the opponent is just going to concede the match there, letting the move go through, taking out the Registeel, and we're able to take that game. So GG's to opponent there, into next game we see Lombre into Lantern once again, so very good lead matchup for us. The opponent is choosing to stay in here, so I'm actually going to shield this. They're clearly double weak to grass, otherwise why would they stay in with a Pokemon very weak to grass, and they're going to swap into Jellicent. Now, one of the things that I'm not great at is baiting. I feel like it's very risky here, so I go for the Grass Knot, and if I just went for a Bubble Beam, could have grabbed a shield and also dropped their attack. Now, unfortunately, that means that a Shadow Ball and a Surf will pretty much KO, but from this range, I can just barely live it, so I'm going to let that move go through, go for the Aerial Ace, and if they let this go through here, I will be able to maintain alignment, and the opponent does no shield, so Golisopod just barely hanging on there. Actually, that might be slightly better for us, but anyways, we are going to come in with the Lombre here, going to go for the Razor Leaf farm down, but actually they come in with the Escavalier. I can now just fire off a Bubble Beam. It's not really going to help me too much, but what it will do is kill the switch clock timer, and that will allow me to swap back into the Heatran. We can just shield this up here. The opponent full sends the drill run, fine with me. We go for the Fire Spin farm down, and I'm not sure if I could have made it to the Earth Power, so we play it safe. We go for a Magma Storm. The opponent has to farm to a Surf and a Thunderbolt to get the KO there, so the opponent realizes there's nothing they can do, and they just concede the match there. Into next game, we see Ludicolo in the lead, and they're actually running Bubble, so I could have just gone straight for an Aerial Ace there, and possibly even grabbed an early shield, but instead, gonna shield, they full send the Leaf Storm. That would have done huge damage, and they're gonna swap into Golisopod. So far, pretty similar teams, although they are running Bubble instead of Razor Leaf, so the slightly less toxic version of this team. Anyways, we're gonna go for an Aerial Ace, and Aerial Ace is gonna grab a shield from the opponent. Based on that damage, I should be able to live this, but you can see my IVs are pretty awful, so unfortunately, they get a full Shadow Claw farm down, which definitely is not ideal for me in the slightest. But we are going to come in with the Lombre, and I'm just going to no-shield this. Lombre actually has some decent bulk, so Aerial Ace not going to do too much damage there. A Leaf Storm definitely would do more damage coming from the Ludicolo. So at this point, I'm going to wait to see what their second charge move is here, as the opponent is going to fire off an Ice Beam, so definitely going to shield that up here. And then going to try and swap. Never mind, the opponent swaps into Jellicent, and once again, I should just bait here, because if I go for the Bubble Beam, they're not even going to be able to take me out with a Surf. But unfortunately, because I go for the Grass Knot, first of all, they outpace me, and secondly, Surf takes us out. But also, Surf going to do big, super effective damage up against my Heatran here. So the opponent is going to fire off the Surf. We can't really afford to overfarm at all, so we're going to go straight for the Earth Power. And from this range, Earth Power should be enough damage to get the KO. But they're going to come back in with the Ludicolo, and it's a simultaneous KO there. So if I just baited with a Bubble Beam, I think I would have been fine. But GG's to that opponent there, very well played. Into next battle, we see a Poliwrath in the lead. They're going to Safe Swap into Ferrothorn, and this game is pretty much over already. But something that we do have to be wary of is if we give that Poliwrath too much energy, despite Golisopod completely walling it here, it's actually still a bit of an awkward situation. So instead, I'm going to allow them to make it to a Power Whip, get me very low, which is intentional, because now we're only going to give them 1 counter's worth of energy, which is actually really important in this matchup, because Heatran goes for the Earth Power, and now we can come in with either Pokemon. I'm going to come in with Golisopod, just because I feel like Lombre has some better matchups in the back here, and we can completely wall the moveset, and we're actually able to go for an Aerial Ace before they even make it to the Icy Wind, and they've got a Lantern in the back. So you can see just by allowing the opponent to make it to a charge move up against our Heatran, giving them very little energy, we just solidified that matchup. But anyways, into the next battle, you're going to see Ferrothorn in the lead, and they're both going to come in with Skarmory, and this is where obviously having Liquidation is very helpful, because we are first of all resisting the Steel Wing damage, and Liquidation and these Shadow Claws are hitting for neutral damage here, so we're in a pretty good position here. And because I've now shielded, I should be able to take any even shield scenarios now, because I can make it to back-to-back Liquidations here. So firing off the first one, grabbing a shield from the opponent, and winning CMP with the next Liquidation. And from this range, Liquidation gets the KO. We flip switch advantage. But they're going to come in with Mantine, and this is a mistake. Honestly, I should just swap straight away into my Lombre. I know, of course, Lombre will be completely walled by the Ferrothorn, but what it would do is allow them, or basically force the opponent to think, okay, I'm going to come back in with my Ferrothorn, and then we can just come in with the Heatran, farm them down, and come out with a lot of energy. But instead, we do the opposite. We allow the Mantine to get a lot of energy, and Mantine with a lot of energy is very dangerous for this team. So, going to come in with the Heatran here. They throw on slightly awkward timing. We've realized now that most of them are going to be on Water Pulse, so we're going to overfarm here, but the opponent makes a very nice catch there. We're going to fully undercharge this though, and this will allow me to get a huge Fire Spin farm down. But because they're now going to be able to land a Thunder, this will put me into range where even an Aerial Ace will get the KO. So despite coming out with back-to-back charge moves loaded, Mantine did leave with an Aerial Ace loaded, so they're going to shield the first charge move. And unfortunately, they are at an Aerial Ace. So Aerial Ace from this range gets the KO. They're able to wing attack, farm down the Lombre, and unfortunately, we do lose that game. But GG's to that opponent, very well played there. I definitely should have swapped back into my Lombre to bait out the Ferrothorn once again. But into the next battle, and speaking of Ferrothorn, they Safe Swap into it, and Heatran just completely destroys it. And the opponent just can't be bothered, so they're going to concede the match instantly. So GG's to opponent there. Into next game, another Ferrothorn in the lead. So once again, going to Safe Swap into Golisopod, and the opponent is going to stay in here. And like I mentioned at the start of the video, X-Scissor is actually preferable in this matchup, but it's not that bad. Here I'm going to go for a Liquidation just because I'm fishing for a debuff here. Liquidation does connect, it doesn't get the debuff, and again fishing for the debuff. I probably should just go for Aerial Ace since it is cheaper and it is neutral damage, but we get the debuff this time around, and now I can just safely shield this up. I will be able to maintain alignment. I'm going to be down 2 shields, but aligning my Heatran to that Ferrothorn will be nice. But the opponent comes back in with their Ferrothorn, which is something that I don't really want here, because but I realized they actually still switch lock because they took a while to swap out there. So instead, we come in with the Heatran, they go for a power whip, they only make it to the power whip, and they've got a Pelipper in the back. Now, this is decent for us, but if they overfarm massively in this matchup, which they should be doing because they've got 2 shields here, and I'm only making it 2 Magma Storms anyways, the opponent can actually come out with so much loaded energy, and of course Hurricane can one-shot both my Pokemon that I've got remaining in the back. So very difficult here, but we're going to come back in with Golisopod. We've got a Charge Move already loaded, so what we're going to do, actually never mind, we don't have it already loaded, but we're going to throw straight away here. But what I don't want to do is allow them to put me into range where they can just fire off a Charge Move, so instead we randomly swap there, and we're going to catch a double resisted Weather Ball, and that's huge for me because now the opponent will make it to the Hurricane, but Golisopod can just farm them down, and the opponent recognizes that, so they undercharge the Hurricane, and I'm able to take that game. So GG to the opponent there. Into next game we see Lombre into Pelipper, and by the way, my commentary might seem a little bit off here just because these battles were done a few days ago. I can't really remember what happened, so I kind of just forget, and then suddenly I make a play where I'm like, oh yeah, this thing happened, but I forgot to talk about it, or I'm already talking about something else. But anyways, the opponent's going to swap into Lucario, and this is one of the matchups that I was talking about in the intro, where maybe just predicting what they've got in the back. A lot of the time when I've seen a Lucario say swap, they've either had like an Escavalier or even like a Ferrothorn in the back, in which case Heatran will be very good there. But unfortunately, because we come in with the Heatran there, if they do have either of those Pokemon in the back, then actually my backline's not going to do that well against it. But either way, going to come in with the Lombre. If they go for a Weather Ball here, it's not going to KO. But here is the Escavalier, and if we had Heatran, we could just shield once and go for a full farm down. But unfortunately, with Golisopod, honestly, an Aerial Ace is going to do a ton of damage. We've already seen most Escavalier are running Aerial Ace in this meta. I'm going for the Liquidation. Liquidation is going to grab a shield, and I should be able to live this, but unfortunately, I just won't be able to come out with 2 Charge Moves loaded. So we're going to fire off the Liquidation here. Liquidation will get the KO, but it's going to be game over, unfortunately, as the opponent can Wing Attack, farm down Golisopod, and unfortunately, we do lose that game. So GG's to opponent there. Into next game we see Jellicent in the lead. They're going to say swap into Registeel, and we're going to respond with Heatran now. Unfortunately, we don't click on the Magma Storm there. That was a bit strange. It looked like I tried to click on it, but they go for a Zap Cannon and they don't get the debuff, so that's very nice for me. We're now going to overfarm. Magma Storm will definitely get the KO from this range, so going to fire it off. We get the KO there, and we've got a lot of residual energy, so if they come back in with the Jellicent, I'm going to overfarm here. I'm going to throw just before they make it to a Surf. Honestly, I don't know what Heatran's stats are in the Great League. We probably win CMP, but I don't want to risk it, and because we overfarm so much, the opponent throws on CMP. It turns out we do win CMP there, and we get the Jellicent very low. Now, of course, they can go for a Surf, take us out there, but that's absolutely fine. We can come in with our Lombre. I think they're 2 hexes away from the next Shadow Ball there. So actually, we're going to come in with Golisopod. And at this point, I'm going to shield this move here as the opponent is going to fire off a Power Up Punch bait. I don't know if that means they're running Power Up Punch in Shadow Ball, but either way, going to go for the Liquidation. And this time, fishing for the debuff does work out in my favor as we drop their defense. And now, I should be able to Razor Leaf farm them down. It turns out they're running Thunder Punch, but it doesn't matter because these resisted Razor Leafs will get the farm down. This is just going to be another Power Up Punch, so I can very easily live this. And I know that Jellicent is 1 away from a Surf, but they're 2 away from the Shadow Ball. So Surf, again, double resisted. We tank that very comfortably. We get the Razor Leaf farm down, and I'm able to take that game. So GG to opponent there. Into next game we see Registeel in the lead. So once again, going to swap into Golisopod. At least this time we've got Liquidation here, so I can fire it off into the Registeel, and it's going to do some decent damage here. Not that much damage. Registeel is still very bulky, and unfortunately we don't get the defense drop, but it doesn't really matter. I feel like if we drop their defense, they'd probably just swap out anyways. But either way, they drop our attack, which is not ideal. But then they swap into Jellicent, so this is okay for us. We can just start firing off Aerial Aces. At this point, I've realized, yeah, I don't really need to go for no, never mind. What am I talking about? I was about to say we're not going to go for Liquidation and fish with a debuff, but actually, like 2 seconds later, we decide, actually, yeah, we will go for the Liquidation. I don't really know what I was thinking there, but either way, going to come in with the Lombre. We go for the full Razor Leaf farm down. They are still slightly switch locked here, so I'm hoping I can make it to a charge move, but they just barely outpace me. At this point, I probably should just no shield. Shield, it's a Zap Cannon. First of all, they drop my attack, and secondly, they've got Poliwrath to hard punish me. Should have just no shielded that because, of course, with Registeel in the lead, they've probably got 2 like water type Pokemon in the back. and unfortunately, now we're just giving this Poliwrath basically infinite energy there. They go for an Icy Wind, they drop my attack here. We are also going to be able to drop their attack with a Bubble Beam, but not before they make it to a second Icy Wind. So at this point, there's no point throwing a charge move. They're able to counter, farm me down, and unfortunately, we do lose that game. But GG's to upload there into the final battle of this video, and I will say at this point, like, for some reason, I was getting a lot of weak connection, a lot of really crazy stutters, and like, I just wasn't able to fire off my charge moves when I wanted to, but the opponent goes for a wild charge, we actually barely hang on, and we make it to a Bubble Beam, and that's huge from the Lombre, because Bubble Beam actually grabs a shield from the opponent. We are now thinking about what to do. We're going to come in with the Heatran, and the opponent swaps into a Araquanid, and this is absolutely fine with me. They're probably, well, actually, they might be running Water Pulse, but I feel like they're probably not. So I'm going to go for the Magma Storm here, and I'm just going to No Shield, expecting a Bubble Beam. I think this was probably slightly too early for a Water Pulse anyways, but we are just going to bank a ton of energy, then swap into Golisopod. And this might be a Bug Buzz. I'm actually going to shield this because Bug Buzz would do some decent damage. I know the Magnezone left with a Mirror Shot loaded, but they weren't at the Wild Charge yet. And at this point, this is just going to be another Bubble Beam. So again, just going to No Shield. Now going to go for a full Shadow Claw farm down. I realize I'm at 100 energy, but it doesn't really matter here. And we are going to see that, unfortunately, we start to lag. So I don't get a Shadow Claw through or the Charge move. They go for the Mirror Shot. We live that. We're going to go for one. Oh my gosh. We go for one extra Shadow Claw. Somehow they get 2 Volt Switches in for free. But luckily for me, they do let that go through, and they've got double bug and water in the back with Golisopod and Araquanid. We go for the Magma Storm here, and at this point I'm feeling pretty confident as long as I can actually fire off my charge move, because you can see my Golisopod IVs are pretty rubbish, so I feel like I'm probably going to win CMP here. So if the opponent does let that go through and go for a full Shadow Claw farm down, I should win CMP, and we are able to fire off the charge move. So luckily for me, Aerial Ace will be taking out Golisopod, and I'm able to take that game. So that's going to be it for today's video. If you did enjoy it, please make sure you leave a like, leave a comment letting me know, and as well, don't forget to respond to the question of the day if you haven't done so already. And if you want to see more content like this in the future, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on post notifications. That way you'll be notified whenever I upload a new video. And if you want to take your support even further, you can now become a channel member with perks including early access to new videos, shoutouts at the end of each video, custom loyalty badges, and custom emojis to use in the comments. I want to say a massive thank you to everyone that has already become a channel member. Your support is greatly appreciated, and with that being said, thank you all so much for watching today's video, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.